Howie Roseman warned us yesterday changes are coming on the offensive side of the football, and I don't think he's lying.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. And thanks for making the Locked On Podcast Network the number one sports podcast network. I'm your host, as always, Lurie DiBiase. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL. You're going to get $20 off your first purchase. Howie Roseman met with the media yesterday, as did Nick Sirianni, for the end-of-the-year press conference after the Eagles fell in the first round to the San Francisco 49ers. And Howie talked about something during the presser that it was kind of at the end of the press conference when he wasn't really asked the question, and he talked about it in the middle of the presser too, about changes coming on the offensive side of the football, the need to become more balanced on both sides of the ball with rookie contracts and then those extensions that go out to your core long-term pieces, those draft picks you nailed in the first and second round, those guys that you want to keep long-term. Howie Roseman talked about how they drafted a lot of offensive players for like 3 straight drafts, and those picks were long-term starters. He then had to pay those guys top 10, top 5 annual contracts at their position. Like, these are top 5 highest paid guys at their position in football. Most of them are top 10. Some of them are top 5. And so because of that fact, as a result, the defense had to get younger and they had to get cheaper. So they drafted a lot for like 2 to 3 drafts. What did they do when they had their offense become more expensive? Those offensive core pieces moved into their second contract. They moved into their prime. The Eagles defense was made up of a bunch of first and second round picks on all 3 levels, including even positions back in the day that Howie did not draft early. Cornerback, safety, linebacker. It was mostly made up of guys on rookie contracts on all 3 levels. Now that Jalen Carter is going to be up for an extension, Jordan Davis needs a new deal, Jalen Phillips is a free agent, Nakobe Dean is hitting unrestricted free agency. In a couple years here, you might want an extension done for 2 all-pro corners and Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean. Jahad Campbell is a rookie right now, but like he seems like he's going to be a core piece. Zach Bond is already getting paid a top 5 contract at linebacker. Moro Ijoma is a UFA after 2026. There's so many players like Nolan Smith. Jalix Hunt is already heading into year 3 of a 4-year rookie deal with no 5th-year option as a 3rd-round pick. This defense is about to get really expensive. So as a result, like Howie said yesterday, the roster has to even out a little bit. It has to balance out. They're going to need some inexpensive rookie talent on the offensive side of the ball. He talked about it, how they've done so well hitting on draft picks. Like I think the stat he said was 14 of 15 players they drafted in the first couple rounds over the last 5 years have been long-term starters. And obviously it's really hard to hit at that kind of rate year in and year out in the NFL draft. Howie Roseman knows that more than anybody, considering his past track record before 2021. He was a terrible drafter in the early rounds. But as he said yesterday, there's an emphasis this offseason on the need for inexpensive. That doesn't mean they're settling and they're trying to downgrade their talent on offense, but there is a need to get cheaper on that side of the ball naturally as the defense gets more expensive. So, ladies and gentlemen, Eagles fans everywhere, prepare for change on offense. And I'm not saying they're going to completely tear this thing down. I don't think it's going to be like it's been the roster construction over the last couple of years where it's all the money is allocated on offense and all the draft picks have been allocated on defense. I think it's going to even itself out. Now that you have core pieces on both sides of the ball at different, ages of their career, it's going to even out. So you can't have the most expensive offense in football and then turn around and pay everybody on defense. Even the Eagles, who spend more cash up front than any team in football, the Eagles backload cap hits more than anybody in the NFL. Even Philadelphia cannot keep everybody. So there's going to be some tough decisions to make on offense, and even if they have to get cheaper on offense, they still can't keep everybody on defense. They can't keep both Jalen Phillips and Nolan Smith, then turn around in a couple of years and pay Jalix Hunt, then pay Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, and Moro Ujoma, all $20+ million. Oh, and by the way, Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean need $30+ a year at that point as all-pro cornerbacks. You cannot do that. It's just not. Look, the NFL is a soft salary cap league, but it's not the NBA like it used to be where there was a luxury tax and owners could go over the cap as long as they were willing to pay that tax. They could spend, like in baseball, $1 billion+. Look at the Los Angeles Dodgers payroll. That isn't the reality even for the Eagles in the NFL. So there is change coming. That was probably my biggest takeaway, one of them from that press conference yesterday, specifically from Howie Roseman's few questions that he was asked and that he answered. It was mostly a Nick Sirianni press conference, which Mark Farzetta said on our squad show today is normally rare. The questions normally go to Howie instead of Nick, but a lot of the questions were for Sirianni. But that to me was my biggest takeaway from Howie's side of that presser, is that he's warning us. Even that last thing he said, he wasn't even asked a question, but he talked about, how they need to build for the future. That doesn't mean that they're not going to try to do everything right now to win in a championship contending window, but they also need to make decisions for the future. It felt like he was almost saying, hey, just be patient with us. Don't be mad if we do make certain hard decisions on offense. So now the question is, after hearing him say that, my brain started going to last night, what could be those changes? What is coming? Excuse me, what is coming to get cheaper on offense? I think the number one thing that you're going to see is that Dallas Goedert is not extended. Somebody that had 11 touchdowns in the regular season, he had 2 in the playoffs, 13 total in a contract year after having to take a $4 million pay cut last year. Dallas Goedert is likely going to leave in unrestricted free agency. He priced himself out of Philadelphia. So I think that's going to be something that you see is changing on offense. The tight end position is going to get younger and it's going to get cheaper. I would not be surprised at all if they draft. I think it's very likely, actually. I even thought it could come last year because I didn't know if Dallas Goedert was coming back. We didn't really know until after the draft that Goedert would be back. I imagine because they didn't last year, they're going to draft a tight end in the first 3 rounds. I even saw some projections where they took the Oregon kid in the first round. I wouldn't be surprised. I think they're going to get cheaper there in free agency as well. Goddard's probably going to walk to a better deal on a better team, and maybe you sign an Isaiah Likely on a 1-year prove-it deal. I like the idea of that. That's a younger player that maybe you're banking on. He fell out of favor a little bit in Baltimore this year for different reasons. They extended Mark Andrews, but Likely still is a very good young player that flashed a lot of talent the last couple of years. And he made that huge catch in that do-or-die game against the Steelers, Week 18. I could totally see that at tight end, getting cheaper in free agency, bringing in someone like Isaiah Likely or maybe a David Njoku type. That's a little bit cheaper than Goddard. And then drafting somebody early on within those first 3 picks. I think they bring in a pass-catching tight end. Something else, like an A.J. Brown trade. I don't want it to happen, but Howie Roseman did not really say definitively in that presser. I don't think he wants to trade A.J., but I do think he sees the benefits cash-wise in trading away A.J. Yeah, you got to take on that huge dead cap, but in a couple years, you get a lot of cash relief, and you're going to need that upfront cash to pay a lot of these defensive core pieces. So, again, I think it would take a really good deal and A.J. Brown saying, I want out for Howie Roseman to move on. But that's something as well that could help this team balance things out financially on both sides of the football. An A.J. Brown trade, that's Dallas Goedert to me is absolutely gone. A.J. Brown is kind of up in the air. I would say right now it's 65%. I'd say Brown's back. But there's a 35 to maybe 40% chance, 30 to 40% chance, I'll say, that he's traded. So that's something else you could expect or anticipate, just prepare yourself for, is an A.J. Brown trade. Something else, like Lane Johnson, maybe having 1 more year left, having a restructure where it's just a 1-year contract, and then he rides off into sunset after 2026, hopefully with a Super Bowl ring. Maybe they move off. I don't think they would move on from Lane Johnson if he wants to continue to play. As long as he's the best right tackle in football, you keep that guy, right? But maybe like Lane Johnson, they talk to him about where he's at. Maybe they get one more year of Lane. Maybe he doesn't come back. Like there is none of this is like set in stone that it's going to happen. But I could see a lot of these potential changes on offense. Goddard gone, A.J. Brown traded, Lane Johnson retiring, or a restructured deal where he's done after one more season. Another thing, the Jalen Hurts contract extension. That's absolutely coming. Unless they, the only thing I could see is if they do like a Goff Stafford type of trade and they get Joe Burrow, right? That's my galaxy brain tinfoil hat going on. Jalen Hurts is going to be the Eagles quarterback probably of the future, and they got to get those cap hits down. He has a $31 million cap hit this year, and it continues to spike over the next coming seasons. They're going to want to get that done, that extension, to backload some of those deals to get some of this down. So an extension for Jalen Hurts. And another thing, they're probably going to draft a guard to replace Tyler Steen and to upgrade at right guard. Tyler Steen has 1 year left on his deal. Was not great this year. I think Tyler Steen, they're not going to extend. Landon Dickerson, questions about his long-term ability to play at a high level, considering all the injuries that he has suffered, not just with Philadelphia this year and throughout his career in the NFL, but at Alabama too. Like maybe, again, I'm not predicting any of this, but these are the questions they have to ask. Maybe they do say, hey, Landon might not age. He might not play as deep into his 30s as Jason Kelsey did. And, Jason Peters and Lane Johnson. Maybe this is more of a Brandon Brooks kind of situation where the guy has like 5 to 6 really elite years in Philly, but then his body kind of wears down and he's not worth the contract, the number that he's at right now after that extension a couple years ago. So those are some of the changes that could come. Now, I don't think they're getting rid of Devontae Smith, Saquon Barkley, Jordan Mailata. They're not going to just completely tear this offense down in the name of building up the defense financially, but a couple of these things will happen. Like, I think the Jalen Hurts extension is absolutely happening. Dallas Goedert is absolutely on the way out. And then, who knows? Lane Johnson's future, A.J. Brown's future, Jahan Dotson's definitely gone. They're going to go cheaper and younger at wide receiver 3. A.J. Brown, like I said, could get traded. That stuff is definitely up in the air. So is the future of Landon Dickerson, Tyler Steen. Expect some change to happen on offense in the name of evening this roster out financially. I thought Howie Roseman it was interesting that he said that. He was very intentional with what he was talking about there, and I definitely don't think he's lying. All right, guys, coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. It's interesting. Some things that we knock Nick Sirianni for, I actually think Howie Roseman and Jeffery Lurie prefer it that way. All right, guys, today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by Ultimate QB Football Legend. The draft pick positions are set for a lot of teams in the NFL. So many teams are looking for a franchise quarterback. You ever wish to become a pro quarterback drafted first overall by your team, the Philadelphia Eagles? Well, now you can. There's a mobile game just for you called Ultimate QB Football Legend. In this game, you step into the cleats of a number 1 draft pick quarterback, and it's your job to lead your team to greatness, to help turn a failing franchise into a dynasty. This is the number 1 QB career mode game on the mobile app stores, and it introduces the most realistic environment with full career control. Sign contracts, train and upgrade yourself, build chemistry with teammates. You can even give input to your GM on roster moves. You can play the actual games in 2D, and so much more to become a pro football legend. You'll deal with the ups and downs of a quarterback career, from rookie nerves to playoff drama, and every choice shapes your journey. Ultimate QB is totally free to play, has no ads, and works 100% offline. Perfect for when you want to sneak in a quick game or 2 on the go. Just head over to ultimate-qb.com or search for Ultimate QB in your app store. And if you use the promo code LOCKEDON in the game store, you'll get a free boost at the start of your career. Ultimate QB Football Legend, QB1. It's your legacy. Guys, today's show is also sponsored by Home Chef. As the new year gets going, a lot of people, they're trying to simplify their routines, and dinner is a big one. Between busy work days, cold winter nights, and a packed schedule, having an easy, reliable dinner plan makes a huge difference. I know that for me. I work 2 full-time jobs. Food, to me, it's not a priority. It's always on the go, whatever I can just get in my body fast. And that's where Home Chef comes in. They take the stress out of cooking by delivering fresh, pre-portioned ingredients right to your door with easy-to-follow recipes that actually taste great. They're rated number 1 by users of other meal kits for quality, convenience, value, taste, and recipe ease. And it's easy to see why. Meals come ready to fit your schedule, 30-minute recipes, oven-ready trays, or quick lunches. They have over 30 weekly options, including family-size meals and different dietary choices. For a limited time, Home Chef is offering my listeners 50% off your first box, free shipping, and get this, you want a sweet treat? Free dessert for life. Just go to homechef.com/lockedon for 50% off your first box, free shipping, and free dessert for life. Must be an active subscriber to receive free dessert. Thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day, and thanks for making the Locked On Podcast Network the number 1 sports podcast network. Guys, if you haven't already, subscribe to the Locked On Eagles Everydayer Club for the offseason. $5 a month gets you our shows ad-free. You're going to get a members-only Discord channel with all of our Locked On hosts, including myself, a Locked On Eagles channel specifically to talk birds, but you've got an NFC East chat, today's games, like so much. You get merchandise discounts on our Locked On merch store. And then for the All Access Pass, $15 a month, you're also going to get one-on-one texting with myself all throughout the week whenever you have Eagles questions regarding the offensive coordinator search, free agency, the draft. You'll get one-on-one texting with me, exclusive episodes that I make only for our All Access members, and so much more. An everydayer email, a newsletter after our episodes. Check out lockedoneagles.supercast.com to learn more, or head over to lockedonpodcast.com/everydayer. So, again, I'm thinking a lot about that press conference yesterday with Nick Sirianni and Howie Roseman, and I talked on the show yesterday about how the Eagles, they really value a lot of things about Nick that I think I don't want to say overlook, because I don't want to say we're not justified in being critical of Nick's value as a head coach to the Eagles compared to what some other head coaches do across the NFL. I don't think we put too much stock into a head coach being a play caller, being a good schemer, whether it's on offense or defense. A head coach, providing stability on at least one side of the ball, I think is really important. But the Eagles, again, they put a lot more stock into other things too. Nick's motivating skills. He's a culture setter. His in-game management ability, although I'm always hit or miss with Nick with in-game management, but they think he's a great hands-on talent developer. There's a lot of things that they think he's a good delegator. I think they do value a lot about Nick. And it's interesting. For me personally, again, I think if you need a head coach of the offense and a head coach of the defense for your head coach, I personally would just get a new head coach, right? I think that's a pretty powerless head coach, even with all the other things that Howie Roseman laid out that Nick Sirianni does, right? But for me, again, I think this is the way the Eagles almost prefer it. I think Nick Sirianni was supposed to be a play caller. I think Jeffery Lurie, definitely when you look at his track record, wants his head coach to be an offensive play caller, an offensive mind. That's why he drafted, or I should say, hired Andy Reid, Doug Peterson, even Chip Kelly. Nick Sirianni started in 2021 as a play caller. That's always been Lurie's blueprint, is find the young offensive mind that might be a year early before breaking out as the number 1 coaching candidate. Let's get him a year early rather than a year too late. But I think what they also like about Nick and why they do want to keep him is that he's okay with the power dynamic in Philadelphia. He's okay being just a CEO head coach. He said it yesterday in his press conference, how he's trying to be the best elite head coach that he can be for this team, not a play caller, not a schemer. It really feels like Nick is leaning into who he is, what the Eagles want out of him. He's accepting the power dynamic in Philadelphia. I think he has a self-awareness or a lack of pride that Doug Peterson eventually did not have. I really thought eventually at some point we were in for a power. I said it this past offseason. If Kevin Patullo doesn't work, I said this last year, I wonder after year 5, just like with Doug after year 5, if Howie Roseman and Jeffery Lurie want to get more involved again, who's the offensive coordinator, if Patullo doesn't work, if Nick would allow that like he's done in the past. Doug Peterson said eventually after 2020, he put his foot down. He said, no, Like, this is what I want to do. I want in-house promotions, and I'm not going to waver. And Jeffrey Lurie said, move on. And Doug was okay with that costing him his job. He said, enough is enough. He was not okay with that power dynamic anymore. Nick Sirianni, I wondered after winning the Super Bowl, even if Patullo didn't work out, he was not going to be okay with that leash kind of getting tight again. But that hasn't been the case at all. He instantly fired Kevin Patullo. In that press conference, he talked about wanting to be the best head coach he can be for this football team, whatever that means. He was very open-minded to letting this offensive coordinator that gets hired run the entire offense, just like Vic Fangio does on defense, maybe even picking his own positional coaches. Again, I'm not getting rid of, please don't get rid of Jeff Stoutland, but like maybe bringing in other guys. Maybe it's not Scott Loeffler anymore as a quarterback coach or Aaron Moorhead as a wide receiver coach. Maybe he allows another coordinator to bring in his own guys. The fact that Nick is doing that, and I think it's a positive, it shows how much he truly cares about winning, how selfless he is. That's, a huge pro about Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts is I think they're very self-aware of their limitations, their pros and their strengths and weaknesses, and they don't let their pride and ego get in the way. Even though I think Nick would be justified in not being okay with this dynamic. It's not like this across the NFL. Howie Roseman and Jeffery Lurie are very hands-on GMs and owners. They've been since Chip Kelly was fired and they quote-unquote took their team back. They have always wanted it this way. And I think that they like that Nick, even though he doesn't call plays and you might have a new coordinator every single year, I think Howie and Jeffrey, like they want it this way. They don't want a guy. They need a guy that's willing to take a back seat like this and maybe not have full autonomy of either one of his units on offense or defense. Nick across the league, I don't know if he would work as a head coach with a lot of NFL teams, but for the Eagles specifically, I think he's the perfect guy for what, as frustrating as it is for me, I want a play caller. I think they do too. I want a consistent voice in Jalen Hurts' ear schematically, play calling wise, year after year to find consistent offense year after year. But I think the Eagles really value the other parts of Nick, like the selflessness, the fact that he does not have an issue with the way this organization is structured. And I think that's why Howie kind of yesterday went out of his way to hype up Nick. I think that's a huge part of this. I was really curious at the end of the year. I'm like, is Sirianni going to be okay with this again? Because you know Howie Roseman's going to go into that meeting. Jeffrey Lurie's going to go into that meeting and say, hey, we're spearheading this thing. Like, we're picking a guy from outside the organization that's bringing in a brand new offense. And here's what I read from Jeff McClain actually about this exact topic in an article this morning. Listen to this quote about the search for a new OC. Quote, Howie Roseman will lead the search. Owner Jeffrey Lurie and his son Julian, recently appointed to a formal role within the organization, will also be in the interviews, per a team source. Sirianni will be in the meetings too, but it is apparent the senior members of the front office will be making the final call. I would understand with somebody like Nick Sirianni that has the resume and the track record he does. I understood it with Doug Peterson too, even though I didn't trust Doug's decision at that point. I don't trust Nick picking a coordinator. I would totally understand why they would say, this is not okay anymore. I'm not cool with this. But props to Nick. Like, he cares about winning more than anything. And he saw that it did work when Kellen Moore came in 2023 or 2024, excuse me, and they won a Super Bowl. And he's willing to deal with it again, at least for one more year. And I think that's kind of what the Eagles want, is a CEO kind of coach that they would hope calls plays, but doesn't want power, that doesn't care about personnel, say, that's okay with a GM and owner middling. I don't know if that's the right word, but being more involved than maybe they should be. And that's something that I also took away that was interesting from that press conference yesterday. All right, guys, we'll wrap up today's edition of Locked On Eagles. Coming up next, an underrated thing that was a problem on the Eagles offense this year, that's got to change in 2023. Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast, we are brought to you by Gametime. The NFL season, it's in full swing. The divisional round of the playoffs are here. There's nothing like being at the game. The crowd noise, the energy, cheering alongside other fans. Watching at home is great, but being in the stadium, It just hits different. The frustrating part has always been getting tickets, waiting in queues, dealing with logins, and watching prices change right at checkout. That's why the Gametime app gives the advantage back to fans. It's the hack for unlocking amazing NFL tickets and experiences in just a few taps. I pulled up Gametime actually just the other day to check out some upcoming NFL playoff games. I might be traveling on the road for a few. My brother covers the Buffalo Bills. Looking at that game in Denver, found some great ticket options almost instantly. The app is incredibly intuitive. Browsing, comparing, and buying tickets took just minutes, and you get a view of your seat before buying, so there's absolutely no surprises. Take the guesswork out of buying NFL tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app. Use our code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account. Redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today and get back to being there live. Guys, today's show is also sponsored by FanDuel. The NFL divisional round is here. FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. Every game day during the NFL playoffs, FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get in on the action. Because right now, every NFL playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost pack waiting for them inside the app. Each game day, you're going to see a pack loaded with multiple profit boosts that you can apply to bets that you like the most. Open your profit boost pack first thing on game day and see what boosts that you want to apply. The boosts let you lean into your game day instincts, whether you're backing momentum, defense, quarterback play, even though it's so up in the air for the playoffs now. Josh Allen's the only guy I trust left, but maybe you're betting on Sam Darnold this weekend, Brock Purdy. I hope not if you're an Eagles fan. Maybe you're betting on coaching. Every play feels bigger with FanDuel, and the boosts make your bets feel that way too. So visit FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day. All right, wrapping up this Friday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. Things move fast. We're already 1 week into the offseason. The Eagles, update real quick on their offensive coordinator search. They are still busy at work. Zach Robinson, the Falcons offensive coordinator, that's going to be moving on from Atlanta after Raheem Morris was fired. He is in Philadelphia for an interview. I don't love that option, to be honest. Not a fan of that name, but he is in Philadelphia right now, so the Eagles are... They're underway when it comes to interviewing offensive coordinators. Sounds like Charlie Weiss Jr. That's kind of heating up a little bit. There was another report today about the Eagles' interest. Let me pull that up. Let's see what was going on. I'm kind of torn on that hiring. I like some ideas about that. Some things I'm concerned about. I want an NFL experienced play caller, but yeah, from Brandon Lee Gowton, source. Eagles showed interest in Charlie Weiss Jr. before their season was over, and he could interview for the coordinator opening in Philly as soon as next week. So Charlie Weiss Jr., Zach Robinson, Mike McDaniel, Brian Dable, these are all guys the Eagles currently on their short list are very interested in. No matter what, whoever comes in here, they need to change a lot about this Eagles offense. Another thing that we didn't get a lot of in 2025 from this offense that we need more of next year, and it sounds cliche and cheesy, but this Eagles team on offense, I need to see more next year. I need to see more passion, more fight, and more aggression. When you think about it, just watch that offense come out on the field so often compared to the defense, right? The defense is flying around the field. It feels like everybody is brothers out there, best friends. They're celebrating in the end zone. They're playing aggressive. They're hitting. They're forcing turnovers. They're pumping up the crowd. The vibes of the Eagles defense this year, it felt like two different teams. It was so high. Jordan Davis became a leader of that team. Jalen Phillips gets traded to Philadelphia, instantly falls in love with playing in the city for Vic Fangio and for this defense. Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, and Reed Blankenship, the brotherhood in that secondary, and how Zach Bond and Nakobe Dean became mentors for Jihad Campbell. Jihad Campbell, even after basically getting benched when Nakobe Dean comes back, handles it like an absolute pro. And then you look at the Eagles' offense, and Saquon Barkley said this a lot this year. The team vibes on the sideline, especially on offense, was miserable. It was not good enough. It was extremely negative. And I think a lot of that has to do with the A.J. Brown drama. I think a lot of it has to do with, Jalen Hurts, who was way more vocal this year as a leader, according to Jordan Mailata. But your quarterback is on the quieter side vocally in a lot of games. He's more stoic. I think that's a lot of the issue. And I want to see more emotion, not just from Jalen. I thought he did a great job of that this year, comparatively speaking. I think A.J. Brown, if he is here, needs to fully buy in. Like, those are things that guys need to get healthier. I think they were miserable because they were injured, too. So those are things that got to get better for next year to get the vibes back on track. But also, they also just need to, I don't want to say they should not be perfectionists anymore, but this team, like, it's really good to have super high expectations of yourself. But they have to learn, I don't know what the right word is. Like, they need to learn how to lose again. They need to learn, even though this year was just so far from perfect, you were absolutely right to be pissed off if you were on that Eagles offense about the execution and the play calling. But they do need to learn how to not be completely miserable when things aren't perfect throughout the season, because that's how things kind of stack up and kind of spin out of control, kind of steamroll downhill. So for me, it's like, passion, fight, aggression, emotion. I was rewatching the Rams game the other day, the comeback, week 3. Jordan Davis blocks the, field goal to win the game. And I look at Jalen Hurts after that touchdown to Dallas Goedert and the way he's just so fired up and the way they all, after the game in the locker room, are going nuts. You don't see that consistently enough with this football team. Sometimes it gives like Patriot Way vibes. And again, it's good to have those expectations. It's good to be the champion. The Super Bowl is what's going to satisfy you, even if that, like the never-ending chase, the standard, as Jalen Hurts says, is so important. But for me, it's like whoever comes in as well as the Eagles offensive coordinator, I want to see them, and this is Nick's job too, and it's Jalen Hurts' job and the leaders of that team. A lot of this is on A.J. Brown, and his negative energy at times, I think, can impact this football team. And his teammates love him, but I mean like his demeanor on the field, right? His body language. They got to fix that. The coaching staff has to fix that this year. The players have to fix that. I've just been thinking this week about everything that went wrong with this offense, and there's so much to talk about. Quick passing issues, the run game, the injuries. Of course, Kevin Patullo is conservative and lack of answers with play calling in the second half of games, and stagnant predictability formation-wise. So many issues with this offense this year. But like that thing that you can't really, what's the right word, measure, that's not quantifiable, like passion and emotion and like just joy and positive vibes. I know that sounds lame, but like they got to get back on track in that way. I want to feel like this offense is having fun again in 2026. And obviously you have to play well to have fun, but in some of those wins, the offense would make some big plays at the end, and it felt like it wasn't good enough for them. And again, I like that they're not satisfied, but you got to find a middle ground. Because Saquon Barkley said it, and he is somebody that I think really helped in 2024 in this department, of somebody that has a high standard of himself and is always working to be better, is never satisfied, but is also such a positive vocal leader on the sidelines with great body language. When his guys at running back behind him score, he's cheering them on. When Dallas Goedert scores a touchdown, Saquon's always one of the first guys there celebrating with him, whereas A.J. Brown at times, I don't ever see him celebrating unless it's Devontae Smith scoring, if he's getting his that game. Like Saquon, I take what he says very seriously because he's a great leader, and he changed the bad vibes of 2023 and 2024, and it's a really big reason they won the Super Bowl. Even in that mic'd up in Super Bowl 59, Saquon's like, everybody here, like, we need you right here. We need you level, not too emotional, but don't get too low. And he was the one that was saying this year, the vibes on the sideline were not good enough on offense. And that's another thing in 2026 I want to see. I want to see them play loose, play free. I want to see them having fun like the defense did. I want to see them playing aggressive. The second half of games, I felt like they were playing scared, like shaking, like, oh my gosh, we're going to give this game away. Just don't give the ball away. Let's punt. Okay, rely on the defense. That has to change in 2026. Whoever the coach is that they bring in, whatever they do schematically, that's going to be an instrumental piece in turning around this offense in 2026. And I think Nick Sirianni plays a really big part in that. But he can only say so much. He can lead a horse to water. It's really up to the captains and the leaders of that offense from a personnel perspective. All right, guys, that's going to do it for today's edition of Locked On Eagles. Thanks so much for tuning in. Thanks for making us your first listen each and every day. Until Monday, thanks so much for downloading, watching, and listening, and let's go Birds. Fly, Eagles, fly.